Something I don't see many people discussing is how to mark music properly. It's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, and I keep coming across the same issues many, many times over. And the real reason, is that I really feel that improper marking of music really slows down the process of learning music. So I'm especially talking about the early stages and from the very first week of getting a new piece. I see kids making a lot of mistakes, right? They make note mistakes like pitches, and they also make rhythm mistakes. And so, they'll bring the piece to the lesson, and then I will, show them, what they need to correct and things like that. And then they mark it, and what happens, I'm sure you teachers out there can sympathize, is that the next week they bring back the same mistakes again. So I don't have much of a tolerance for that. I expect my students to, address the things that we have taken care of during lesson. I expect them to be responsible for that throughout the week, and so I do expect them to not bring back the same mistakes, but unfortunately it still happens. So of course we all do it, so there is a bit of a margin that we can allow, but I think by learning how to mark music more effectively, we can definitely speed up the beginning stages of learning, and we can really become more efficient. One of the things that I always do, and as you gain experience you should do, is come up with very short code words or symbols for the things that you mark all the time. For example, if I know that, like in Bach, I want to mark some phrases. Typically in a normal piece, I know where the phrases are, it's very clear, but sometimes we need to mark phrases just so that we can make them a bit more defined for us mentally. And so Bach is a good example because a lot of his phrases are kind of like run-on sentences, and there are a lot of elided cadences, so sometimes it's hard to know where the phrases really end. And so I'll put a little comma mark wherever I feel like there is a phrase definition. Another common thing is I'll work out, some like bow distribution, and so I'll decide that, there's this one place I need to spend more bow, so, we'll need to like either use bow or save bow. So those are the words I like to use. I like to use and save. Some people say bow speed, some people say slow bow. There's so many things, and my students often, I tell them to mark it themselves. Sometimes I mark it, sometimes I tell them to mark it, and I'm kind of curious to know how they will mark it themselves. So, if it's a rhythm that they didn't hold long enough, then they'll say long, or I'll tell them like go. If there's a certain few notes that they keep playing too long and they keep lingering on it, then I'll just write the word go, or I put an arrow forward. A really good one that I'm sure a lot of violinists use already is the arrows. So if you find that you're playing the wrong pitch, like you have to play a high two and not a low two, for example, like a F sharp instead of an F natural, then you'll just draw an arrow going up over the note. And I highly, highly suggest that you develop your own system on marking things. One really funny thing I see all the time is like I tell them to do something, and then they'll take their pencil and they'll write for a long time, like I'm waiting for about 2 minutes. This is often on a Skype call when I'm doing a video conferencing lesson. And so I'm waiting, and then finally they're done. And so I find out they wrote this entire novel way on the right side and very, very far above the actual place that they need to execute, said technique. And then I look at it and, of course, they're not going to see it as they play, and so they keep on doing the same mistake. Sometimes they do notice it, so that's, kudos to them, but it's still really, really long explanation, and it's way on the other side. So I highly recommend, I'm going to show some examples here. I'll insert some clips that you should mark a little bit to the left, a little bit early, just slightly early. You don't want to be looking like you're marking a different note. So you definitely want to mark near the correct note, but mark earlier, mark to the left, mark lower, mark closer to the note head. These are just general guidelines, and keep it as short as possible. Okay, so here's the Vivaldi A minor concerto, third movement from Suzuki Book 4. One of the things I commonly do in here, a good example is how I mark dynamics, for example. Very simple. I like this method. You could circle it too. Sometimes I circle it. And sometimes when my student really doesn't pay attention to it, I get my color pencil out and then I circle it in color. But that's usually like after I've given them 2 or 3 chances. And then this is piano here. This opening is crucial, that we have this tiered dynamic. So we start out loud, right? And it's a real attention getter. And then this is like the echo. It still has tons of energy, but it's way softer with smaller bows more near the upper half. And then back to strong again, all right? And then it says martellato. A lot of kids, they just ignore it. They just pass their eyes over it, don't realize. So sometimes I'll say, the word I usually use is martele. So I'll write like martele. And then I'll say like over here, this is a long note, and so I'll say stay. Stay means a lot of things. It could mean you're not going to shift there. You're going to stay your left hand in position. You could say stay meaning the bow stay. So you could say like bow, or like stay bow, or something like that. But so you're going to spend your bow here. Or you can say freeze. Freeze is another good one. But you need to put it right around there. I see students, this is another pet peeve, they sit there and they go like, they're trying to talk about this note. And I told them, don't lift your bow here, because if you lift your bow here, you're going to play soft here, and then it just ruins the atmosphere because you're moving around too much, right? And then when you place the bow, it's a little bit like, there could be a mishap, there could be a bounce or too rough of a landing, and then you're going to play soft anyway. So it's not easy to put your bow on the string and when it's soft, because you usually have to put your bow, more in the middle. And anywhere that's not like the lower third, it's a little harder to place the bow without having a bounce, all right? So it's harder to do a quick retake. So I'll usually use these words. As I showed you in the Accolade concerto, I usually say like frog. So right here is a good example. Right here is I call it a frog moment, right? So right here, between here is a frog moment, and same here, frog, frog. This is typical. I always tell my students to do those 3. Same thing here. This is also frog, but I think by then they'll get the hang of it. So instead of doing that, she said she has her students write on the note that needs to just go really fast. She says BS. She said the kids found that funny, and it means bow speed, but use your imagination. And so anyway, so that means that your up bow is going to go much faster. We're going to deliberately apply a lot of speed, and that will achieve the same result. It'll make you go pretty close to the lower half, or frog down there, right? So you can use this method, or you can use the frog method over here. But I like frog because when I tell my students frog moment, right, frog, they know exactly what I'm talking about, and they know exactly why I'm talking about it, and they can picture it in their mind. I often when I'm teaching use the word frog. So it just informs the player that they need to, get to the frog by that certain point in time. So wherever that word is placed, that's, they're going to finish that slur, for example, at the frog. The reason is for the next note. The next note right after the word frog needs to be at the frog because it's an important note, or it's a loud note, it's a sforzando, or you just need a lot of bow. So a lot of reasons why you want to be at the frog at a certain point in the piece. Another thing that I often mark, so you'll see that there's frog like everywhere. Another thing that I often mark is practice boxes. So I'll just go ahead and either literally put a box around it, but I do it lightly so that it can be removed later, so you can erase it. But often I'll just use brackets because the section is quite big, so you just make a nice clear bracket here and here. And then, depending on how old they are or whatever works for that student, I'll put how many times. So I'll put like a 10x, for example. That means practice it 10 times. Now, just a quick tip here. If you practice a certain spot that's much harder than the rest, and you practice it 10 times, what you should do is you should do a test run. So after you practice 10 times, then you run it. It's like that's like your concert right there. You get one shot and you have to run it. And if you can do it well, then you've done a good job with your 10 times box. If it's not going well, then you might want to do a few more, like 3 more or 5 more. Then it has become a 15 times box. I always tell the student that, sometimes it's good to give them a goal. So telling them like do it 5 times, or if they're 8 years old, do it 8 times. But I don't want them to just do it. It's like, like clocking in, clocking out without any brain activity, right? So I don't want them to just do it and then, not see results. I want them to really make sure after 8 times that they've actually made a very evident progress. And if they haven't, they have to do more. So that way the ball's back in their court. I give them a guideline 8 times, but then they have to check it. They do a test run after 8 times. And if it's not really going very smoothly, then they need to do more. And then tomorrow they need to do it again. And every day you need to do it again 8 times. And then you always need to test it. So going back to the markings, another thing that we need to mark very clearly is bowings. So as you can see in this example, the bowings are not what I like to do, so I changed them. And it's very difficult when there's a lot of black markings that are printed like permanently by the publisher, and you need to, just change them all. So it becomes quite messy. So you definitely don't want to do the thing where you just mark it lightly once and then the black original marking still looks stronger than the one that you marked. That is definitely a no-go. And also you want to make it really clear, right? So I definitely go over it a few times and I place it strategically so that the original marking is not so distracting. I want you to basically, when you at first glance, like boom, you just looked at it for half a second, that you know which one it is. You don't want to be questioning yourself, because when you're playing a hard piece, there's plenty of things that are overwhelming your mind as it is. You don't want to be adding to that the stress of trying to figure out and decipher markings. And then the other thing you do is just get a whiteout tape, the tape one that you can just go over it and then mark above. But I still wouldn't use pen in that case. I would just try to see if a pencil would work. Always make sure you have good equipment with you. You want good writing implements. I always have 2 pencils and 2 color pencils with me at all times when I'm teaching, and an eraser. I always have those eraser caps, and there's a certain one I like because they really work. There are some copies like the Henley and the Baron-Reiter Urtext copies that cost a fortune. Sometimes when you're building your library, you're easily spending $1,000 just on a few sets of music, a few volumes, and then you're marking them up a lot, and then if you erase it and you have a bad eraser, you're going to either just tear up the paper, you're going to mark it with worse markings, or if you mark with a pencil, that's why I don't like mechanical pencils most of the time. I don't like mechanical pencils because they end up embossing or like engraving the paper, and then it's very difficult to remove. So I know it seems very nitpicky, but when you're using music, sheet music, all the time, and you're marking things all the time. I see this with orchestra players. My teacher was one of my teachers was a concert master of a large symphony in the United States, and he did so much marking that he would only use a certain type of pencil. And I think we're all just naturally like that. When you use something a lot, you have to be selective of the quality and what you're using, what you're doing. Now, another thing I wanted to address is a lot of something that my students get wrong also is where to place the sharps and the natural signs and the flat signs. So I'm going to go ahead and include this clip right here as well. So first of all, if you're not in the habit of drawing them, I highly recommend you just practice. You could just practice, especially the natural sign. This is how you draw a natural sign. It's always straight. It's vertical. I see kids doing sharps and they slant it, but it's not true. You go vertical and you slant the horizontal ones. Okay. Same with the natural sign. These are vertical. They're not slanted, but the horizontal ones are slanted. The flat looks like a B. You just draw a B, but it's a little more pointy on the bottom. It looks like half of a heart, right? So you just do like that, okay? And the most important thing is what you see in the center. You have to aim the center of it. So do you see how I'm going to show off how great this eraser is? I don't mind doing all this here because I know that this paper and this eraser are trustworthy. So see how there's no damage here, and I did it lightly. So I'd like to address that because this is a common thing I see when I want, kids to remember their accidentals, for example. This is a good example. There's a flat in the key signature, but see, here's a natural, and then sometimes kids might forget that's still natural over here. So a lot of times I see this. I see them putting it like over here, all right? I understand why, when you write and when you speak, it's called B natural, right? You speak the B and then you speak the natural. You write the B and you write the natural. But in music, it has to be natural in front, all right? So you always put, this is incorrect. In music, when you see actual music notation, you have to put the natural sign in front of the note. It's always in front. So that's the exception. When it's written like that, it's the natural's after. When it's spoken, the natural's after. All right. So it's not going to be very much help to you if you write it, after. Okay. It has to be before. Here's another good example. There's an alteration here. So during this entire measure, this C sharp is still good, right? So see that C sharp right there? A lot of kids miss that. So you put it in here. And make sure you aim the center to the right place, okay? It needs to go, the space needs to be, hitting the center of the sharp. And you want to do nice and clear too. For teachers and professionals, it's something that we don't really think about too often anymore, but I do feel like maybe those of you out there, it might be a good topic and might be helpful. So please do give the video a like and also comment below if you found it helpful or not helpful, or if there was something else you have a question about, or if I forgot something, I should have included something that's really important. And also I'm going to go ahead and insert right here another video. I realized that probably most people don't really go to the the home page of YouTube channels very often, but I'd highly recommend that you do if you're looking for something, a certain topic. I have my playlists in an organized fashion, so you can look for the category and then go click on the playlist, and if you just scroll through, you'll see some topics that might be useful to you. And if not, then I'll just go ahead and include 2 things you can click click on right here if you have more time to watch. Include a video and a playlist here for you so that it's convenient. All right, hope you have a great day.